I'm so happy Zoom worked.
Mm-hmm.
I was so mad, like, oh my God, we're gonna kill Jennifer.
I'll wait till that.
Well, welcome back. We'll call to order the meeting of the Arkansas State Board of Pharmacy, the afternoon session here. Next on the agenda, we have an informal hearing with Walgreens, and with that, Ashley, I'll turn it over to you.
Yep. Hey, for me. Let them introduce themselves. If you guys want to tell the board who all you are and who you represent, Erica can show you how the microphones work. Because they're
Push. Yeah. Hi, Erica G, Wright, Lindsay and Jennings. It's good to see you all again. I'm here with Dave Stauffer from Walgreens. And then we also have Dwayne Pignon from Walgreens. We appreciate you getting us in a little bit early.
we appreciate you guys being here a little bit early, but we'll see how long our break goes after this. So Eric, I know you guys have kind of seen informals before. It's like Dr. Charlie's hitting back in on us as well. Just a couple of housekeeping things we like to do with informal. Myself, I'm the director of the board. Ashley is our legal counsel. And then you are looking at most of our board members at the table in front of you. Dr. Mack has been coming in and out on Zoom as she's been able to. Biggest things, as you know, this is an informal. We're trying to have just a frank conversation back and forth across the table. At some point, the board members will come up with some suggestion for action, which you guys can either accept or, decline. If you accept it, we go forth with whatever it is they've asked us to do. If you decline it, it's opportunity to request a hearing before the board at a later date. I always ask, do you know why you're here?
Yes,
And
I
yes, we
definitely do.
And
Yes.
do you have any questions about the process?
No questions about
Probably
the process.
not. With that, I will turn it over to Ms. Bales for a brief overview, and then I think the board members just want to talk to you for a minute.
That's good.
So in your board packet, you have an order notice of hearing. I'm not asking you to make findings on this. We've routed this towards the informal hearing because basically the facts are largely undisputed. The allegation in this case is, in April of 22, board staff mailed Walgreens, and this is Coweta store, a proposed consent agreement, which they signed for failing to have an Arkansas pick. And then we checked back, and in June of 23, they still had the Arkansas out-of-state permit, but still had not had Arkansas licensed pharmacist in charge since January of 22. So this would be the second violation for not having an Arkansas pick, which brought us to this level of hearing in front of the board instead of offering another consent agreement on this. But I will note that there's not been any shipping into Arkansas since January 12th of 22. But still no pharmacist in charge. They couldn't find one. So.
First time violation, board has authorized staff to offer a non-disciplinary $2,500 paperwork fee to straighten out the paperwork for either failure to have or failure to notify of a change of PIC in a timely manner. Anytime it's in state, we've always had business that has transacted. This one is, as Ashley pointed out, a little bit different because they did not transact business, but in discussing hindsight, it would have been cleaner if they just given up the permit. So it did make a technical violation, but no shipments during that time. So now y'all get to talk to them.
I'm sure you don't want to hear from me. Dave Stauffer's here to talk to you about what happened.
I know you introduced yourself as being Walgreens representatives, but what's your role?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm pharmacist by background at Walgreens. My role is senior director, specialty pharmacy operations. So I have various responsibilities as it relates to the operations of our pharmacies across the U.S. And specifically related to this situation, Coweta, I appreciate the time to explain the situation. I know Ashley, you provide a little bit of a history, but just kind of give a little more details, right? So we first established the out-of-state Arkansas license in early 21. At that time, shortly thereafter, we did ship one prescription into Arkansas to take care of a patient. And then fast forward a year from that point in time, in January 22, the Arkansas license pick left Walgreens, went to an external for an external opportunity. At that time, both my team and local leadership communicated to the respective store in Coweta that possessed the out-of-state license that any future shipping of prescription in Arkansas would need to be ceased immediately, which they did. which leads to kind of some of the events that Ashley talked about, right? So we received then the, the preliminary consent agreement in spring of 22, I believe it was March or April, which we did review, signed, paid the $2,500 fine from a disciplinary perspective. And then in parallel, really around the same time as we did, find a local new pick to be a pick for the Quetta, Oklahoma Walgreens, with the intention that individual would be licensed in Arkansas in the very near future. Now, there was various circumstances, whether it be personal circumstances, staffing at that situation, other pharmacy-related activities that prevented that individual from getting licensed in a timely manner. Both field leadership and my team followed up throughout 2022 with this individual to inform them of the need to be licensed and check on progress. Unfortunately, they were still unable to achieve licensure. If we would have known, we were not aware that we could have had reached out to request an extension of that timeframe. If we would have known that, we probably would have went down that pathway at that time. Now, circle back, a year later, right? We then received the consent agreement or the initial subpoena in July, right? We did proactively then relinquish the license. If we look back throughout the events of 2022, we probably could have done a better job with communicating directly with you guys, explain the situation, challenges with obtaining a Arkansas license pick, and then relinquish the license sooner. We did relinquish it in July of 23, given all the events that occurred. I should note too, I know, John, you talked about this, we didn't ship any prescriptions into the state post the leaving of the Arkansas license pick, which leads us to here today. We wanted to come to the board to apologize that, we failed to communicate with you guys sooner. And, the activities and actions that we've taken and us being here from a senior leadership perspective demonstrates the commitment to this event and the seriousness that we take this. So I want to open up if there's any questions that you guys have on the situation.
So just to be clear about the timeline, so there was one prescription that was shipped into Arkansas, but that was during a time that you did in fact have a PIC in place?
That is correct.
Okay, and then in January of 2022, you ceased to have a PIC in place.
Correct.
And that's when the initial infraction, if you will, the $2,500 fine was levied. That was related to that?
Correct.
Then this, I guess what was termed as a second violation, was this simply a rediscovery in June of that same year that the PIC had not been replaced?
My understanding, yes. So we followed up throughout 22 to obtain licensure with that individual. And like I said, for competing reasons, they were unable to. So, I think we were unaware that by ceasing shipping of the prescriptions, essentially we were under compliance with the rules and regulations of the state. As I stated, no activity of shipping conducted post the pick leaving. And then this kind of resurfaced in July and then got brought up to the priority to look at it to address.
Okay, so you had the first incident, you had a cease and desist, don't ship anymore. Then it was just rediscovered then a year and a half later that it just hadn't been met yet. But yet there was no harm, no foul, rather to speak, because there had been no additional prescription shipped in.
Correct.
And then you relinquished the permit.
That is correct, in July of this year.
We do periodic checks of if we are missing PICs. We have one of our fellow staff members actually kind of keeps a list of that. And I think that part of the confusion in this is, I believe some states will say, if you don't meet this criteria, just don't ship right now and everything's fine. But for Arkansas, we say, well, to hold the permit, you have to have that. It's kind of I'd say a parallel to people that go, well, I didn't know if I was going to keep working or not, so I didn't get my CE and I want to get it now. And it's like, well, the requirement is to get the CE during the biennium of the license. And then when you renew, you show that you did everything you're supposed to in that biennium. It's not for next biennium. And we do have an extension available, but the extension we have available is a 15-day extension twice. So you could have a total gap of 60 days. When we first started this, our general assumption is that there have been ongoing shipments, but they were not. They did do control on their end. Otherwise, you'd have a staff suggestion to hit them with a much larger penalty because they would have been shipping illegally. But on their side of the road, they made sure they were not shipping.
What is the request? I'm sorry. What is being asked of us?
The staff has brought this forth because previously the board has told us if it's a one-time PIC violation, we can have that non-disciplinary offer. If it's a second time, the board oftentimes will the board doesn't give staff the ability to make that decision. The board generally looks at, is it a straight violation? How many shipments were made? What other extraneous circumstances there could be. We've had the board say double the normal penalty. We've had the board give a per prescription penalty on it as well. I mean, we've had people that may have shipped 20,000 prescriptions, not zero.
Right.
This one is, on the de minimis side of anything because it did not involve shipping. It was just the paperwork issue.
So what are they asking for again?
Why are we here?
Yeah.
So the staff didn't have the ability to really make an offer to them because the board, anytime it's a second violation, the board makes that decision or that offer, generally at an informal.
What is the intent of Walgreens? Like, are you wanting to keep your permit and eventually get an Arkansas license, PIC?
In the future, we like to, once we establish an Arkansas license pick, would like to reapply for that licensure.
They gave it up for now, but they could reapply in the future to get it back. To reapply in the future, they would have to show an Arkansas permitted PIC.
Essentially, I mean, is there a board recommendation? One, but essentially what I understand we're doing is we're being asked to consider whether or not this second violation, if you will, how we want to handle that. But in mind that they've already relinquished the permit. So there's not a current or ongoing problem. It's just that we're addressing what was already found back in July of last year.
Yeah. It's basically what action do you want to take for the violation that happened then, knowing that we do not have circumstances where we are asking for you to calculate a fine based on X number of prescriptions, which is where we have been at other times. This is more just, it was a second violation, no shipment.
So I have one question. This is Debbie. Were y'all, I'm just trying to kind of get my head around this. Were y'all not doing anything for that year and a half because you thought you'd already taken care of it by not shipping? Or was it just kind of out of sight, out of mind? You didn't keep remembering that you needed to get somebody? It just seems like a really long time to not have done anything.
Yeah, and what we did, and we followed up, my team, specifically local leadership, and they followed up with the respective store to see where the process was for the individual to achieve her licensure in Arkansas. It was a time in 2022 where there were some staffing challenges, there were some personal commitments that she had, and it was during peak COVID vaccination times as well. So there's a lot on that individual's plate. Follow-up happened occasionally throughout 2022. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to. So, we did follow up with the individual throughout the year and into 2022. It just at that time she was unable to complete her requirements to get licensed.
And what about the first half of 2023? Y'all gave it up in 2023, right?
Yeah, we gave up the license in July of 2023, but the follow-up continued throughout.
Okay.
When we sent the subpoena, I think that the light of day hit everybody, and they at that point just gave up the permit and said,
Correct.
We're not going to keep dragging this along. We may try again later.
Board have any other?
And there was no prescriptions.
No prescription sent, correct?
Their investigative cost on this?
Minimum. I mean, the time that we put in to do the subpoena and follow up, but we had no travel costs or anything like that.
And they're paid up on any previous fine.
Yes, they paid the previous one. It was fine.
Doesn't seem significant.
If we just take no action,
Pardon?
I'd make a motion that we take no action.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay, so we have a motion on the floor.
Let me set it over.
So Debbie can hear you.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we take no action against this permit.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Board, I assume will reduce this to writing.
Thank you very
Item will
much.
be closed.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
And we can take another break while we figure out, we've got, I think our 3 o'clock may be able to join us about 1:30 if we're lucky. We're trying to get moved on. All right.
Short again.
I'll send you that writing.
What did you just say? That's that informal?
Yeah, no, I think that was Walgreens for what open.
Didn't see the informal one though?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, the
And now
next
they're-
one should be, Dixon, and then the one intern.
So that's it. So they're not doing nothing. They're taking a break.
I guess, cause I guess they already resolved the whatever stuff. before. I didn't even make it back in my office. and everything, So,
That Walgreens is but that wasn't informal, so.
yeah, that one should have been in the last informal, but I don't know why we didn't have it, but. Yes. So, what time is it? Yeah.
We're gonna come back on briefly. We're hoping that our 3 o'clock will be able to come in just the next little bit. But we've had several discussions with, especially the informal committee that looks at new applicants and trying to help get some further guidance. We, constantly are trying to polish our process on the staff side to say, hey, what else is it that you definitely do want to see, or you don't care if staff signs off on different application issues. Along those lines, we've started trying to do, when we do have the board together, if we have newer applications that we think the board would sign off on without an appearance by the person, we will give an overview of the circumstances. You can't necessarily see the whole application, but just in a hypothetical situation, would this be something you're okay with us signing off on and issuing permits? Along with that, I'll say that we've had bright line distinction over the years that, for the most part, the board has told us if a person says they have nothing on their background and something comes back, meaning they have basically, have decided to bear false witness or have lied on their application, only the board, either informal or formal, can make a decision on that. So in the past, we've always automatically said that is coming to an informal. Every once in a while, we get one that we can look at and go, this is kind of wild. This happened 25 years ago. It was shoplifting a pair of socks at a store. Like, I can possibly understand that they didn't even get arrested, but nonetheless, we thus far brought all those in. We have just, I don't know, 3. We have 3 that we believe the board would sign off on the overall concept without having to force the people to wait until an informal conference in, a month and a half. So I'll turn over to Ashley to give a brief description of what we got.
Okay, the first applicant disclosed her criminal history on the application. In September of 21, she was charged with financial identity fraud and felony theft by receiving. The felony theft by receiving was dropped. The financial identity fraud was reduced to a misdemeanor. She was given 12 months probation, and I have a letter in here that she's completed that successfully. Her statement doesn't have a lot of information on it. Just says that she completed the terms of her probation and the case has been disposed of. She takes accountability for her actions and had taken a theft class, and she's remorseful and now making positive decisions about her life. So the question is, do we want to see her at our next informal, or is this something that staff could attend?
Yeah. And what year was it?
2021.
But it was not prosecuted.
It was reduced to a misdemeanor.
Reduced to misdemeanor.
How much money was involved?
It was less than $1,000 on the fraudulent use of a credit or debit card. If you don't know, then we can bring her in.
Yeah, if you want to see them, we'll schedule them.
That's fine. Well,
let's think about it. Just
Okay.
maybe the next one.
okay. Put a pin in that one. The next applicant, and some of this is old, so incident happened in December of 2004. Assault on a police officer and public intoxication for an incident at Scooters nightclub. Entered a plea of guilty and was sentenced to 6 months suspended sentence, 200 fine and court cost supervision fees. On May 25th, 2005, they issued a bench warrant for him, this applicant, because he'd not completed the terms of his sentence. He went back in and entered a plea of guilty and got 30 days suspended, $450 fine and court costs. So that was 2004, 2005. There was another incident in 2021. This took place on a military base. It does show up in the background check though, but it wasn't prosecuted. It was an assault on a family member. He was technically arrested for it, but instead of sort of prosecuting it, they took it up his chain of command and he was ordered to complete family counseling, which he did. So.
Get charged with assault for fighting a family member? That's just trying to get along, isn't it?
But this person did disclose their history.
It was fighting, not fellowship.
What was the nightclub again?
Scooters.
Scooters.
You know, they're setting me up. Scooters nightclub. Don't know where that is.
Romantic getaway.
Lawton,
First-
Oklahoma. I take that back. It's in
Yeah.
Lawton, Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Air base. Yeah, so those are 18 years old, a couple of, or, a minor alcohol incident, and then it was assault that was resolved without criminal charges. And told us about it.
In their statement, did they say what happened with their family?
Which one? Do you want to know about the nightclub incident or the? Okay.
I was saying, she and I went through a whole stack and we picked three that were like, maybe they'll sign off on these three.
I just wanted her to say Scooters nightclub again.
He didn't add much about that incident from 2004. It
It
just
wasn't any nightclub, it was Scooters.
it was, and he says there's no excuse for his behavior that day, and he doesn't remember a lot of details of the incident because it occurred 20 years ago. And it's not a reflection of his character, and he completed his terms, and he's retired from the military with honorable discharge.
What's he wanting to do?
He wants a tech
Be a
license.
tech.
So these were all disclosed on the application?
They were,
This
yes.
one was, the previous one, was not, but this one was.
Well, it seems to me there are a couple of breakpoints that would maybe call for a different decision. One would be if it's disclosed or not.
Mhm.
The second one would be whether, if it's a criminal matter, it's been sealed or not.
Yeah, lots of times I don't get those documents
Yeah.
that it has been sealed. Some of these are eligible to be sealed, but as you know, you have to be proactive and get it, ask for it to be sealed after the fact.
Yeah,
I don't have that in this case.
I guess I'm less concerned about a matter if it's going to be available to an employer doing due diligence.
Well, and like in this case, told us every bit of it up front. I mean, that's a public record. So if an employer was so inclined to ask, they would see it from our record, just like they would see it on a search in the court system.
Yeah, so the questionable is if they don't disclose it and it's on the public record, or if they don't disclose it and it is on the public record. Those would be the choices.
If they don't disclose and we discover the instruction from the board previously has been, then we want to see them. I know there've been times at informal where it gets a little bit, I don't know what the appropriate term is, but you end up seeing a whole lot of people that if they would have just told us about it, it would have been signed off on. But since they did not tell us, they get to come visit with you.
So, yeah, these people get told that they're,
Want Debbie to be able to hear you.
a lot of these people get told, that it's not gonna
I
show
see
up on their
Lynn
record,
talking, but I
you
don't
know?
hear anything. Were y'all just chatting?
Oh, yeah, turn your light green light.
Oh. I mean, if their records have been, like they got pulled over for speeding and that if they told them, if they paid the fine and went to driving school, they wouldn't have to, it wouldn't be on their record.
Yeah.
And then they come before us and they didn't put anything down because they told it wouldn't be on their record. Well, I mean, I don't really know if we ought to be worried about that because the law took it off their record.
Well, I think there are a whole lot of people that hear it's not going to be on my record because that's what they want to hear. And I don't know if they brought an attorney with them that said, no, we were told by the court that it would not be on. And that was both the judge's advice and everything else. But everybody says, well, I was told it wouldn't be on my record. Like we hear that all the time.
And keep in mind, our question on our application includes any citations, any arrests, any charge with convicted of a criminal offense, whether or not sentence was imposed or suspended. So that sort of encompasses all of that. I think background checks are probably as good as you pay for. We get a very heightened background check. So I have a lot of people complaining, well, I've got this job and I passed their background check. But ours, because potentially working with controlled substance, it has a greater degree of accuracy. So sometimes that throws people off because they think, well, I'm okay when I go to work this place, so I should be okay here at the pharmacy board. And it's really not that case.
We get a lot of people who go, oh, I didn't think you cared unless it was a felony. I didn't think you cared unless I was sentenced to go to prison. Like and I don't say that flippantly, like,
No, I get it.
it's, we hear a lot of that of, oh, I didn't think you'd care unless so-and-so, or I already got a job at such and such food place, so why should it matter? You're going, well, this is different. You're trying to work in a DEA registered facility with controlled substances and taking care of people in a healthcare setting that may not be able to take care of themselves.
I have not read the application in a while. So is there anything at the beginning that gives a caution to make sure that your answers are complete and honest?
Yes.
They sign a statement to it.
I mean, I can read it for you. It's, you must fully and truthfully report your criminal history, whether or not the arrest citation was dismissed through drug court diversion, expunged under the First Offenders Act, Alternative Sentencing Act 531, Act 305, Act 347, or it happened over 5 years ago. So it's kind of a catch-all. And then at the end of the application, you know, you're signing it, attesting everything you've put in there, that you've read it, you understand it, and everything is true and correct.
Is this a fillable PDF or how's this?
It's a PDF on our website that
They're doing it by hand right now. In our system update, it will be one you would fill out online and have to actively check boxes.
So here's what I'm leading to. So the PDF is online. They view it on the
You can see
screen
it.
and then print it.
yes.
So.
But they fill it out by hand.
Okay, so can we, on that PDF, go in, the part that you just read, could that be highlighted in yellow?
I mean, I don't see why not. It's bolded right now, but highlighting it in yellow could also bring it to attention as well. We could do that.
Because it's not just an argument, but I mean, I think it's a valid concern that if you don't read the application that you're asking for a permit to do the job that you're wanting to do, if you can't read that close enough and answer honestly and directly, then how can we trust you to read prescriptions and the details that that takes?
Agreed.
So back to the application,
Yes.
I would be inclined to go ahead and approve that one. That did disclose both issues.
Okay.
And
Actually, could you explain the issue we have with the legislation and the criminal charges that you explained to me? That solved that issue. I've had a similar issue, as you know, in the past.
I can pull that. Well, I can go grab it, but there's a certain act that allows all boards, when you're talking about licensing, to look at someone's criminal history and certain offenses. And I think we've ticked those off in hearings before. Certain offenses you can deny for that reason, and theft of property is one of them. You know, I think we had an attorney come in and murder. I mean, all the big ones, kidnapping, all those we don't see a lot of those, but those are deniable offenses. When you're talking about whether or not to grant somebody an application for a licensure with a criminal history, then there's certain things that you need to look at, like the years that have passed since the conviction, what they've done to sort of rehabilitate themselves.
Nature of the crime.
The nature of the crime and that kind of thing, which is why we asked them to write a statement so we can pull that kind of information in. But that's outlined in statute. And I can provide everybody a copy of that as well. It's not in our pharmacy board book.
And that's why you have to ask the question to disclose things, even if they've been sealed under those various
Yes.
laws.
And that's also why we bring many of those matters to the board for decision as well.
There's how we have it over the years. It's been through a lot of iterations, but how we have it bolded now. We do have a highlight. So the answer is, I think we can, get Jennifer to also highlight it. But we tell them, you not truthfully report your history, your application will be denied, or you would be subject to other sanctions. Basically, we would administratively deny it. And if they file for a waiver, they would come for informal conference.
So let's say somebody discloses that they were arrested 20 years ago for shoplifting something, theft of property.
A lot.
Is that a matter that the staff, even with our permission, that the staff can approve and go on, and or does that have to come to us anyway?
If you gave us direction, which we've had some direction, like if it's under $100 over.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the reason we're having this discussion
Yeah.
is to get some direction. Generally, that theft of property is listed in that statute that I'm talking about, that boards have the authority to deny. So we don't feel as a staff that we can do it, that we can grant it unless it comes to you all. But if you give us guidance that we can do that, if it's a theft of property from 20 years ago, then I think we're safe to do it on the staff level.
You know, it ain't what you know, it's what you don't. You don't know what's gonna happen.
No, you don't know what's gonna happen.
And you sit there and you think, okay, well, first thing that comes to my mind is if, okay, if we eliminate all the shoplifters from 20 years ago and just say, okay, board staff will approve that, and we rock along for a little while, well, then the next thing you know, the pain in the butt's gonna be the shoplifters from 10 years ago. So
Right.
then we'll go and we'll change shoplifters from 10 years ago, and then we'll rock on, and the next thing you know, we're looking at shoplifters over a year. Well, then what are we gonna do?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say also, maybe you guys don't see necessarily on the back end, we do see technicians stealing from pharmacies. Usually I send them a voluntary surrender and they're happy to sign it. And it doesn't necessarily come back in front of you if they do that. But yeah, that's been an issue. I think it was a hot issue this summer. We had a lot of that going
Do
on.
we have any data on whether or not those people that we're seeing that had prior convictions? Do we track that?
We
at
are
all?
monitoring that. I
We
think
do
Dr.
that,
McCready
yeah.
is.
And I don't exactly. I think most often, Dr. McCready will see and go, this person came into an informal and now they went out and did this. But usually it's as Harold and I have discussed, they're done. Like surrender and you're done, or we'll do an emergency suspension. You're probably done at that point. You've already been given a second chance after some other issue. It's just over.
I'm generally okay if the action is on the public record where an employer can see it, if the employer does due diligence. That lets the employer make the decision as what's appropriate for their circumstance. So I think to me, the real question is what has to come to the board for that action.
Well, that's the only part we generally are dealing with is the guidelines we've been given by the board at this point are if they lie on their application, it doesn't proceed any further unless they come see us.
Have we given you any guidance in terms of the number of years that have passed since the issue?
Not
Since I've
really.
been here.
Like if you said it's more than 10 years old, misdemeanor theft under X number of dollars, if
Not
they,
involving drugs.
yeah, if they admitted up front and everything, you could give us some parameters and we would look for that. And there will be times when we would use that parameter to sign off on it per board policy.
That's kind of in my mind, that was my starting point, was just thinking about the ones that we see in informal.
As long as drugs aren't
Younger than
involved.
10 years ago. And I'm just throwing something out there, non-felonious.
And in reality, if you said, if it's more than 5 years, I would personally almost even say more than 5 years ago, less than $100 disclosed. It's,
You're talking about theft only then, not
Yeah.
like violent.
yeah, theft. We get a lot of people, it's, they're 18 years old and they stole a tube of lipstick or literally a pair of socks or a pair of pants and they get caught and banned from the Walmart. And we see a lot of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, any drug related, anything,
It's coming.
even if I have information that it wasn't necessarily a drug crime, but drugs were involved in it, then we're gonna bring that in front of you all.
Like even if it's a routine traffic stop, marijuana
Yes,
situation.
yes.
And the other category you have is some kind of like assault and battery.
Yes, we do see
Yeah, we
those.
see a lot of that.
And I may could see peeling inter-family
Mhm.
out of that.
Mhm.
A lot of that.
Well, and a lot of it is not officially family, but it's
Yeah.
dating or
Domestic living.
domestic.
situations.
Did we officially decide that that one is, the one that you just went over, we've,
We
Said-
heard one person say they would be okay given that one.
Which one?
do we vote on these or we're
It's
just
the
like nod
honorable
our heads?
discharge.
The former military honorable discharge.
Yes.
But, you know.
That disclosed.
Okay, so let's, yes.
You making a motion on that?
I'll make a motion.
Especially with Mrs. B.
I'll second
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to, do we need a motion? Motion to approve the application with the details that were given.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
That was the second one, right? We
Yep.
didn't identify it.
Nothing on the first one. We're gonna transition real quick.
We're gonna pass around. Rodney.
I took your remote.
Go ahead, man.
There's a paper.
You take the pay with it, right?
Yeah. Take the pokes away.
That's right. The parking spot.
Free parking.
Oh, there it is.
Tabitha House, yeah.
I hit the right button. So we're gonna transition back to our hearing officer.
No, this is informal.
Or I'm sorry. I just thought you said he's on tap for this one.
No, that
We're
is.
not to our hearing officer, but for an informal, it's under Tabitha House that you guys will see. This is our 3 o'clock and thank you guys for coming early. Darren, if you want to introduce yourself and your client, then I'll do the orientation.
I'm Darren O'Quinn here today on behalf of Tabitha House, who's in her final year of pharmacy school at University of Tennessee in Memphis.
Hey, I'm John Kirtley. I'm the director of the Board of Pharmacy, and I'll tell you real quick kind of who you're talking to and how this process works. I'm sure that your legal counsel has explained it, but at this table, myself, I also have Miss Ashley Bales, who's our legal counsel. We're staff members here at the board. You will see one board member on screen. Dr. Debbie Mack is joining us via Zoom, and then I have 7 of my other board members here on the right-hand side of the table that are all kind of decision makers and discussion folks for you today. We call this an informal conference or an informal appearance because we are not going strictly with a order notice of hearing and swearing in witnesses and everything else. What we generally do is we'll have our legal counsel give a brief overview of why we were here. The board members are seeing your application and documents for the first time right now, and then they'll have a discussion with you about your application. At the end of this, they can make one of many decisions. They could vote to deny it, vote to approve it, vote to say we will consider it under some specific circumstances. The most important thing for you is you can either agree or disagree with that decision. If you agree with it, we go forth with whatever the board has instructed us to do as they have voted. If you disagree, it's your chance to do one of two things. Either say, forget this and walk away, or to request a hearing before the full board at a later date. Same number of people in this specific instance since we're in a full board meeting, but it is just a more formal process where we swear all the witnesses in and kind of go one at a time. So I always ask, do you understand why you're here today? Do you have any questions about how the process works? If you at any point need to ask us a question, if you need to talk to your legal counsel for a minute or step to the side, just let us know. We can give you a break. We can help answer any questions, realizing you've never sat in that chair while we do this all the time. With that, I will turn over to Ms. Bales. I will ask you whenever you're going to talk to the board, if you'll turn your microphone on at that point, it'll turn green. There you go, and you'll be ready to go.
All right, Ms. House is an intern applicant. She did disclose in her application that there would be something coming back on her criminal background check. It's one incident from April 4th, 2019. Where she was arrested and charged with felony maintaining a drug premises, felony tampering with physical evidence, felony possession of paraphernalia, and a possession of controlled substance, Schedule 6 misdemeanor. On October 14th, 2020, she entered into a diversion program. That document is in your packet. She signed an order of diversion attesting that there was a factual basis for the charges to exist. She did meet the terms and the length of the program, and then the charges were dismissed on May 1st, 2020.
Okay. So, would you like to tell us in your own words, kind of what happened around this incident?
Yeah, so I was dating someone. We lived in the same household, and I became aware that he had a large quantity of marijuana in the house, and I disposed of it. I threw it away, like poured it down the toilet. All of it didn't make it in the toilet, and he found out. He got upset, and then he put his hands on me. And I was on the phone with my mom when all this happened, and my mom called the police to the residence. And when they came, I pressed charges on them, and they saw, like, the household saw the marijuana that was there, and they actually didn't charge me with anything that night because I pressed charges. And then they called me in the next day they told me that they were going to have me do a restraining order, but they actually were questioning me, and they were like, hey, so we're going to charge you with XYZ because we found a lease that had both of you guys' name on it. And so the first charge that was maintained in the drug premises, the house was in, I can't remember, it was in a certain amount of feet of a school. That's why that charge was there. Tampering with evidence, I got that charge because I wrote in my where I pressed charges, for domestic violence. I wrote that I poured the marijuana down the toilet. At that time, I didn't know it was evidence. I was just getting rid of an illegal substance in my house. And then the paraphernalia was the things that he had there, like he had a grinder there that wasn't mine. And then I think the possession was the marijuana that was around the toilet. And so after this event, I hired Brad Williams to be my attorney. We went in and I entered into the diversion agreement. I didn't plead guilty. And then after 6 months, it was dropped.
You entered into a diversion program with the state of Tennessee?
No, this happened in Arkansas.
That was in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, during this time, I was a teacher in Arkansas. I taught at North Little Rock Center of Excellence.
She's from Jonesboro, and she applied to do a rotation in Jonesboro and needed an Arkansas license to do that. And that's when this came up. She's no longer going to do that rotation. She rescheduled it, but she didn't want this on being denied a license in Arkansas as she goes forward.
Okay. So in 2020, you were a teacher in North Little Rock, and then you went to pharmacy school?
Yes.
And you're at UT in Memphis?
Yes.
Okay.
This happened in 2019.
Yes.
Do you have an intern license in Tennessee?
I don't have one in Tennessee. I do have one in Mississippi. I obtained that in 2023, last year. And I have an active teaching license in Arkansas. I got that after this incident happened.
You don't get an intern license in Tennessee, do you?
Tennessee is an unusual state because they don't actually have an intern license.
Right.
So in Tennessee, dealing with both schools and colleagues of the board there, oftentimes the state of Tennessee, if they were going to make this an issue, they would not know it until the person was applying for their pharmacist license or if you'd gotten a pharmacy technician registration. And I can't recall to what extent they do background checks either in Tennessee. I just don't know.
Have you ever used marijuana?
And then you don't want to work or do a rotation in Arkansas?
Which one y'all want me to answer first? So initially I did want to do a rotation in Arkansas. It was scheduled for February. My family still lives here. I'm doing a 3-year program, so I don't get a break when it comes to rotation. So I was going to do one here in Jonesboro so I could spend time with my mom, but I got that one rescheduled. In the future, I would like to work in Arkansas if the opportunity presents itself, because I'm not sure what I want to do when I graduate. I've liked all my rotations so far. As far as the other question, I have tried it. I didn't like it, and that's not something I did regularly.
Okay. And these are just questions. So you don't have a medical marijuana card?
No, I do not.
Okay.
When and how did the option for diversion come up for you? When did it happen? Who offered it to you? What did they say?
So immediately after this happened, the next day I went in and that's when they arrested me. When I went in for the questioning, and that very next, I think this may have happened on like a Thursday or a Friday. And that Monday I met with Brad Williams, who was my attorney during this, and he handled all of that. So the only time that I went to court was the day that I actually signed the diversion. And I would have to actually read the document. I mean, I would have to reread it, but it was offered to me through, I don't want to say the state, I think Faulkner County.
What were you told the diversion offered you? What were you going to get from the diversion?
My attorney explained it as there were a list of things that I couldn't be doing, like I couldn't be I couldn't be in a bar, I couldn't use, illegal drugs. There's like I think there were like 6 to 10 things on that list that I couldn't do. And if none of those things happened in 6 months, these charges would be dropped.
And what did you understand drop to mean?
I understood that to mean that they would come up as a misevent. He said, so Brad Williams advised me that when you speak about these events, they would be a misevent because I didn't plead guilty. And although I was charged, I wasn't convicted of anything. So I was under the impression that this would just be a misevent. And he did tell me that he could help me with the process of getting it expunged, but he said the things that I'm interested in as far as pharmacy and teaching, that the background checks that you guys do, they will still show up. And so he said, getting it expunged, it would cost money and I could help you do that, but you are still, they would still show up and you would just need to talk about them as a misevent.
You'll have to excuse me, my hearing is bad.
Oh, I'm
Did
sorry.
you say it will come up as a misdemeanor?
A misevent.
Spell that. I'm still not.
Like a missed event.
Misevent.
Yeah, a misevent.
I think right now, she was charged, and so she answered that question truthfully.
Right.
But she was never convicted. There's really nothing to expunge, to tell you the truth. She doesn't have anything to expunge. She could get her file sealed because she was arrested and nothing ever happened. She could seal that file, but I think her attorney told her that the board's going to get that arrest anyway, so it's not really going to serve your purpose just to seal the file from, I guess, the general public.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to get your real world experience and how that kind of thing happens. Thank you.
So she's been administratively denied.
The staff denied her application. She applied for a waiver, which brought her basically to the informal conference.
So just doing a withdrawal is not an option because she's seeking a waiver.
Well, I mean, she could withdraw her application. Like if the board has numerous decisions, approve, deny. If you did not want to approve it, but you did not want to give her a disciplinary looking action, you could offer her the ability to just withdraw her application. It would be able to be withdrawn clean where it did not even have an administrative denial.
Well, I'm not advocating for that. I just wanted to clarify whether that's even an option. Especially since you said your rotation had been rescheduled. That's why I was asking that.
But she does have family here.
Okay.
And if she ever wanted to come back, she'd be right back in the same situation.
Yeah. So
You're a 4th year?
well, I did the 3-year program that UT offered. I'm in the first class of that. So I'm
Senior.
Yeah, I'm in my last year.
So you're gonna be applying for licensure as a pharmacist here in a few months?
Yes.
So, okay.
So is there a way that we can handle it? But yet because it would seem that there's no point in giving her an intern license if she's not going to do an internship. But if she wants to come back, there's no point in having this same hearing all over again.
Well, what we have traditionally done, if there's a set of facts that someone has an intern application or even a technician application, and they indicate that I may never work as a technician, but I'm going to want to get this in case I have the opportunity, but I hope to go to pharmacy school. If you have adopted some set of facts and granted a waiver or granted a permit for a technician, it's assumptive that that would also apply as being approvable for an intern or a pharmacist. So for her, if she thought I might want to get my pharmacist license, especially since Arkansas does things like waive all the application fees, if you grant her an intern permit, we would tell her she needs to take her law test before she can do any APP type rotations, or before she can be a pharmacist later. It would mean that that issue is resolved. She knows that she can apply for a pharmacist license in good standing, and because of our fees, it won't even cost her any extra fees.
So it wouldn't cost her a fee, but it would cost her to take, I mean, she would have to take the law.
Yeah, she'd have to take her law exam.
I don't know if y'all read her letters of reference and all that, but they were glowing.
Really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, based on the information here, if she was here applying for a pharmacist waiver, I would have no issues with that. So.
So how do you say?
Because there is not a felony charge. It was dropped, correct?
Correct.
Believe what she said, I believe what she said.
The charges were basically dropped. So basically, it sounds like what you want to do is make a motion to approve her application, which would also put her in good stead if she applied for a pharmacist license later.
Yes, well, that's where I was.
Yeah, so she wouldn't have to go through this.
Yeah, it would already be signed off on.
Fair enough.
And also just to explain for you, you would be asked to take the law exam now, but you would not have to take the law exam again later. You would have already passed it. So it's not for naught.
Right. Okay.
And one other
If
question.
she wanted to do a rotation, she'd have to pass it before a rotation. But regardless, she'll have to pass it before she gets pharmacist license if she does no rotations here.
Since the application was administratively denied, on any future applications, would she say anything about having a license denied or anything?
Because it was an administrative denial. She basically is here because she's appealed and sought a waiver. So if you approve it, or if you allowed her to withdraw it, either one, the administrative denial goes away.
Okay. I'd make a motion. Oh, go ahead.
The application is when did you make the application for the internship?
I applied, I think I sent everything in, I think the third week of November.
Yeah, November 28th, 23.
So that application is only good for a year though, right?
Yeah.
So she would have to take the law exam before that expires, right?
Not necessarily. What we say is if you get an intern license, even if you get it earlier in school, you cannot do an APPE rotation until you have passed the law exam
In Arkansas.
Will you graduate in May?
Yes.
She's going to graduate well before that would expire.
Oh,
So yeah, but since she's a senior right now, she's in the last couple months. So if she applied for a pharmacist license, which I mean, she could do, next month. A lot of our folks in Arkansas will do it next month just to go ahead and get in the groove of things, which is the application to take NAPLEX basically. So that, once you graduate and you have your degree conferred and we get the registrar sheet from the college, if you're in our hopper of names to be released to take NAPLEX, like we release it the next day.
Okay.
In Arkansas, like if you've already got an application on file and all your paperwork is in order, like graduation will happen on Saturday and we'll have a whole list of people. We'll get the clearance from the college and we'll release them all almost immediately. So we just do that a lot faster than some other states are able to process.
Okay.
So before she could get her pharmacist license, like we could clear her to take NAPLEX, but we will not give her her pharmacist license in that scenario until she passes the jurisprudence exam.
My chronology on when she graduated was not clear.
You're off. You were thinking she's a P3 and it was going to be a year, I bet.
Well, I'm thinking accelerated program, you finish in December.
Oh, well, yeah. Only like one or two schools do it weird that way.
Only one.
So does she just schedule it one off? Like she just schedules her own law test
Yeah.
at her?
Yeah, we do that all the time for people that are coming in to get a license by exam.
So I'll second that motion if nobody's done that.
Okay, so just clarify, your motion was to approve the application for the intern permit?
Yes.
Okay, we have a second. Any other discussion or questions before we take a vote? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you for your
Appreciate
time.
Everybody's time. Thank you.
Nancy, we're going to hand it to our staff and we'll get your permit.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Good luck the rest of the year.
Good luck.
Well, listen to the review first. It's boring.
Studying.
Okay. Well, there's a new review that I gave in December. So you've heard the old one, you can hear the new one, and it's very similar, but there are some slight differences. There you go. Could be worse. You could have had him teaching it.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
It always throws me off when people go, "Are you the guy from the video?" And it literally, I mean, for many years,
Years ago.
yeah, it was a video of me talking. Now it's a video of everything I'm showing them on screen with just my voice coming over it. So no one told me that I was no longer on the video, and I'm going, they have not changed that much in like
I'm gonna use
3
your voice
months.
in AI.
Yeah.
What's next?
We've got a 2:00. If you will give us just a moment, we will see if anyone has shown up. If not, we'll turn it over to our hearing officer, and I can sound the hall for them, or I don't know if you want to sound the hall or if you want one of us to sound the hall, but we'll know in just a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, if y'all want to take a quick break or anything also.
Time in your plan.
Need you to settle down just a little bit.
Here now.
Yeah. I
First.
know you get out of Lake Village and
Second.
you don't know what to do.
I know, right?
Come to the big city, get all excited.
I do. Especially after lunch. You know, I'm ready to go. My opinion.
Bite your tongue.
This has been.
Okay, good afternoon. We will come to order. My apologies in advance for the repetition from this morning's hearing. But I am required to repeat these things. My name is Joshua Baxter, and I'm the hearing officer today in the matter of Keith Dixon, case number 2023171, which is to be heard before the Arkansas State Board of Pharmacy. Today is the 7th day of February, 2024. Please silence your cell phones and devices now. In terms of the proceeding itself, for the benefit of anyone present today who may not have appeared in an administrative hearing, the board will base its decision solely on the evidence presented here today. This hearing is held under the Arkansas Administrative Procedures Act, which means that the strict rules of evidence do not apply, and the parties will be given latitude in introducing evidence. This is to promote a fair hearing and provide the board with adequate information to make a decision. To ensure efficiency of the proceeding, I will grant objections or caution the parties only as necessary. If there's anything that you have in your possession that you want the board to consider, you must offer it into evidence today. All participants to the hearing should be aware that these proceedings are subject to the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, and as such, all parts of the hearing, including the deliberations of the board, are open to the public. It is important that all persons necessary to the hearing are in the room during the hearing. Party attorney or board member needs to take a break, please advise me and I'll take this into consideration. Assuming there are no questions at this point, would the respondent please identify himself for the record?
Respondent is actually not here. This is one of our inspector investigators.
Fantastic. So let the record reflect. Respondent is not present. Counsel.
Yes, if I could state for the record, we have sounded the hall, Dr. Kirtley sounded the hall, and William Keith Dixon is not present for the hearing. I did serve him. I sent a letter certified mail to 2 addresses for Mr. Dixon on January 3rd, 2024. One of those came back returned, the North Little Rock address, the Stamps address, which I think is his family home. He was served there, and you'll find documentation, the tracking on that, where it was picked up by someone at that residence on January 9th, 2024. I've not heard from Mr. Dixon regarding this hearing. So we will be holding it in absentia.
Understood. And it is my understanding from what you just presented that a copy of the order and notice of hearing was properly served. And again, we will proceed in absentia. Board's counsel, would you please identify yourself for the record?
Yes, I'm Ashley Vales. I'm general counsel for the Arkansas State Board of Pharmacy.
In terms of witnesses, I guess we will proceed. Any swearing in this matter? Okay, so we will proceed with swearing in.
Yes.
Do you swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Record reflect the witnesses have been sworn in. Counsel, are there any preliminary matters to be discussed?
Yes, at this time, I'd move to admit exhibits 1 through 9.
Are there any objections? All right, exhibits 1 through 9 are admitted.
And I'd also ask board members to take judicial notice of pharmacy rules and statutes regarding that are applicable in this matter.
So noted. In terms of opening statements, counsel, would you like to make an opening statement?
Yes, just briefly, was discovered on a routine investigation by Investigator Holland that William Keith Dixon was working without a valid intern license or a valid pharmacist license in violation of our rules. He was a graduate intern for a short period of time from August 22 to October 22. Then he was reduced to extern status from October 21st, 22 to his failure in the NAPLEX. He failed that test in November, turned his status in from extern and made his license void pursuant to our rule 02010004D. However, he continued to work at the medicine shop as a licensed pharmacy in North Little Rock from December 1st, 22 until October 6th. And I'll let my witness, Dr. Holland, testify to what he discovered But basically that is the allegations that are outlined in the order of notice of hearing that we will be asking board members to make findings of fact on.
Thank you. Honor the fact that respondent will not be making an opening statement. Let's go ahead and proceed to the calling of witnesses. Petitioner, counsel, will you call your first witness?
Call Dr. Brandon Holland.
Let the record reflect that Dr. Brandon Holland has been sworn in, has been called.
Dr. Holland, can you identify for the board members exhibit number 2?
Exhibit 2 is my summary of my investigation from my routine inspection and the documents that I retrieved from that associated with this inspection.
And did you complete a routine inspection of the medicine shop on October 6th of 2023?
I did.
And tell me what you observed there.
So I arrived at the pharmacy on Friday afternoon and I did my typical routine, walk into the pharmacy. Hey, I'm Brandon. I'm one of the inspectors for the Board of Pharmacy, just here to do my routine inspection. And at that point, I was notified that the pharmacist, the manager was not there today. And as usual, I reassured them, sure to be fine. We can find what we need. If not, we can get back to it and do what we need to do. So William Keith Dixon told me his name and caught it at first, but really didn't. So as I'm doing my license verification on the wall to see who had license posted, I did not see a name that matched close to what he said. So I asked him to state his name again. I looked for that name, still did not find anything. So then I finally did a last name search, wildcard searched, and it returned William Keith Dixon. He told me his name was Keith Dixon. Our system wouldn't show it if I just put in Keith. So I discovered it there. At that point, I noticed that he was unlicensed, had not been licensed for some time. And at that point, I excused myself from the pharmacy and stepped out and made a phone call. And that's when I called Dr. McCready as well as Dr. Kirtley. And Dr. Kirtley, shortly after that phone call, probably within 10 to 15 minutes, met me at the pharmacy.
All right. And then what did you do at that point after Dr. Kirtley arrived?
So I do also want to add, Ms. Bales, that whenever I did arrive, he did identify himself as a graduate intern. I do want to say that. Failed to mention that.
Okay.
So kind of gave Dr. Kirtley a rundown of everything that I'd seen up to that point. We talked about it. Dr. Kirtley came into the pharmacy with me. Dr. Kirtley talked to Mr. Dixon, asked him where his license was. He said, acted like it was posted, even though I had already established at that point that it was not posted. And we went from there.
What records did you pull as part of your investigation?
So for the day I was there, I looked at daily RX logs, which are like the pharmacist signature logs. So they had all of 2023's up to that point there in the pharmacy that day. So that's what I took that day. And then looking further into this, I ended up going back and retrieving records. Same thing, pharmacist signature logs, and also RX totals reports and dispensing reports that would show who the pharmacist of record was for the dispensings, who signed the pharmacist signature log for those days, when they worked, hours worked, those types of things.
Okay. And for the record, those are exhibits 5, 6, and 7.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's go back to his, I guess those would be pharmacy board records about Keith Dixon's status. And you've got a chart here in your, it's on the second page of your report. Tell the board what days Keith Dixon had an active intern license.
So active intern license, his degree conferral date was actually 8/13 of 22. So at that point, he became a graduate intern. On 10/20 of 22 was his first attempt at the NAPLEX. He failed, which would have reduced him from a graduate intern to an extern at that point. And then his intern license would have expired on 11/30 of 22.
And so after 11/30 of 22, he had no valid license whatsoever with the State Board of Pharmacy. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How many days did he work unlicensed according to the records that you pulled?
Total unlicensed would be 135 days from December 1st of 22 to October 6th of 2023.
And where did you arrive at that number? What documents did you look at?
So that would be Exhibit 5, and I believe Exhibit 6 also shows that, where you will observe his signature on the daily report showing that he worked those days.
Okay. Who is Dr. Barr?
Dr. Barr is the pharmacist in charge and the owner of the medicine shop.
Okay. And there were some days that you have reflected here where they worked together. Is
That's
that correct?
That is correct.
How many days did Dr. Barr and Dr. Dixon sign the daily log?
From what I could see where both of them signed, there were 20 days.
Okay. And how many days were there that William Dixon signed the daily log? But we're not sure about the dispensing on those days.
So 28 days. He signed the daily signature log at the end of the day, but the dispensing records did not indicate that he dispensed any prescriptions.
And then how many days, according to the records that you pulled, where William Dixon should have been was unsupervised based on the daily logs and prescription total reports?
So I came up with 61 total days, and what I base that upon is in looking at my daily signature logs. Those were either times where there was no overlap. So maybe Dr. Barr indicated that she came in at 0900 and left at 1400, and he signed 1400 to 1600. There were times of overlap there, lack of overlap in the shifts. And also, as I was looking at the dispensing records, I could see that Christine Barr did not show to dispense any prescriptions those days. Everything dispensed for that day was Mr. Dixon.
Okay. And the daily logs again are exhibits 5, 6, and then tell the board what exhibit 7 is that you should have there in your packet.
This is the RX count by users report that is provided by the software. And what this will tell you, this team totals part there, if you're able to see that, the team totals would be on the right side. You have who the pharmacy technician would be that did the data entry into the computer. On the left side, that would be the person that did the data entry verification. For pharmacist totals, which is very strange, pharmacist totals would be who did the final check of these prescriptions. And then the very final part there, technician totals, would be data entry for each individual technician.
All right, and you've got the dates, basically May through September on those reports, correct?
Right, and I believe it should go to the beginning of October. I think I ran the report from May 1st of 22 to October 6th of 2023, because that's when I first identified that he was the pharmacist of record on some prescriptions beginning in May of 22.
Okay, and now if you would turn to Exhibit 8.
Okay.
You identify for the board what that document is.
This is a lot of information to digest. So what I did is I tried to summarize this the best I could for you guys. So if you need to look back at a table to quickly kind of reference some dates, totals, this just summarizes everything to make that a quick reference.
And that is a document that you prepared based on the records that you pulled.
That's correct.
All right. Do you have anything else you want to add for the record that we have not gone over?
No, ma'am.
Unless the board members have questions for him.
Thank you, counsel. Across board, any questions for the witness?
Are there days that you account for days in which did you account for days in which he still would have been considered a graduate intern? Are these counts, in other words, outside of that?
So the numbers and Exhibit 8 that we have there, I did try to outline those to where those are specifically after those dates that we identified where he would be unlicensed. So that second table there, prescription data entry verified, would have been unlicensed beginning on December 1. The next table, which shows the number of prescriptions, I did break that down where he was a pharmacist of record as a postgraduate, as an extern, And then finally moving on to totally unlicensed as well.
And this may be outside of the scope of what you've already testified, but did you make any determination as to why the PIC didn't confirm that Mr. Dixon did not have a license?
The PSC will be in front of the board at the next board day.
Okay.
So on exhibit 7, he's always listed as a technician. But then so he was signing the pharmacist log, but they were using her name electronically?
That's what's really strange. So if you're able to see exhibit 5 there, I believe it's actually, I'm sorry, exhibit 6. In exhibit 6, where it shows the daily reports and the dispensing totals there. If you'll go into that far right column, I try to highlight the name where it indicates he was the pharmacist of record on those days. So for some reason, it indicates that he's the pharmacist of record there. But as I was saying earlier, what's strange is if you're looking at what you're saying,
Right.
yes, it does not say pharmacist totals,
Sounds like
but why does it show pharmacist of record?
Sounds like they knew his license wouldn't work electronically.
If you go, even if you flip further into these dates, when we get into 23, where starting with December 1st, really December of 22, there would have been no active license, and you can still see at that point, there's nothing there.
So why would he ever sign as pharmacist? He wasn't a pharmacist, right?
No, ma'am, and I think we have more to come on that as well.
Okay.
More to come today or more to come
Phone call.
Subsequent?
I believe we have a phone call that we're going to admit where he actually stated he was a pharmacist when the board made a phone call over to the pharmacy.
Okay. So going back to exhibit 8, if you can look over there for me.
Yes, sir.
So the last one there was 6,622. Those were prescriptions that he was involved in filling after he had no valid permit at that point. Right?
Totally unlicensed. These are prescriptions, not just like data entry verification. These are literally prescriptions that I went line by line in that log and determined that he was the pharmacist of record on those dispensing logs for those prescriptions.
Okay. And then the line above that, the 649, he had an extern license, but those are number of prescriptions that were filled where he was basically functioning as a pharmacist.
Yes, sir.
And what about the 1508? Same thing?
Would have been a graduate intern, but I would say still functioning at that point as a pharmacist.
And then what about the intern?
The intern, so based on those dates, that would have been prior to the degree conferral. And in looking at those dispensing records, it showed him to be the pharmacist of record on 989 of those prescriptions that were dispensed.
So signed in and functioning as a fully licensed pharmacist on all 9,768 of these is your best interpretation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? All right. Thank you, sir, for your testimony. Counsel, do you have another witness to call?
Dr. John Curley. Dr. Curley, tell the board how you became aware of this situation with Keith Dixon.
So on the afternoon that Dr. Holland mentioned he was doing an inspection, it had been an unusually long Friday, and I was taking a rather late lunch that day. And Dr. Holland called me on my cell phone and I asked if I was working that day or if I was off. And I explained to him I was at lunch, but still working. He explained he had just tried the office and had missed Dr. McCready and myself at the office, but told me basically, I just ran into something I've never heard of. I'm inspecting a store and there's a former student here that's claiming to be a graduate intern that appears to be unlicensed. And at that point, I think I reminded him that we don't stir up that kind of stuff generally on Friday afternoons, but at the same time, that's the way it happened. So it was kind of a situation where you go, I'm sorry, can you explain that to me one more time? And I said, well, where are you? And so he explained to me where he was. This is a pharmacy that had just a few days beforehand had a fire on the other end of the strip mall center in a restaurant. And I'd actually even had some exchange of information with the pharmacist who was worried about whether or not they could operate the pharmacy since there had been a fire at the other end of that building. I told him I'm, less than 20 minutes away. I immediately jumped in my car and went there and met Dr. Holland.
Well, tell me about, once you got there, what your interactions were with Keith Dixon.
So when I got there and Brandon and I got a quick overview, I went in, introduced myself, said hi to the technician that was there and to Mr. Dixon, made my way, basically that I'm here at the board's okay if I come around the counter, and did so and started talking to him about, well, who's the pharmacist today? And he would say, well, I'm the graduate intern. I said, well, but where's the pharmacist? Even as a graduate intern, you have to have a pharmacist present. And he acted as if he was not aware of that at the time. And I said, well, that might have been something many, many years ago, but that changed, I think, in about 2008. So well before he had been in school or anything else. So, and these are questions that I already knew the answers to, much of which, but I said, well, where is the pharmacist? Well, she, the active pharmacist in charge is actually on a trip out of town, I believe out of state. I said, well, how about, where's your permit? And knowing that Dr. Holland had already asked about this and seen that there was no permit and had already verified in his computer that there was no active permit in the first place, I was just trying to see, is there an out-of-date permit posted? Mr. Dixon looked up, the permits are actually displayed on a higher shelf and kind of looked around like he was looking for his permit and seemed perplexed that it wasn't on there. And I, at that point, knew that conversation already happened with Dr. Holland as well. So I went on to explain to him that it was our understanding that he did not have an active permit, and he seemed somewhat surprised because he had graduated from pharmacy school. I went through the fact that, well, that permit expires after graduation. I said, besides, my understanding is you're not a graduate intern. You were last classified as an extern. He did not seem to know what that was. We tried to pull up in our electronic database to show him a copy of that letter. We weren't able to pull it up immediately from distance. There was something with our VPN. So I contacted our staff and had them quickly send me a copy of that letter so I could show it to him, which would reflect the first time he had failed NAPLEX when the board notified him that he was no longer a graduate intern, that he was an extern, that he would count in the ratio of interns working for pay, and also a reminder, as I recall, that it had an expiration date at the end of that month for his permit. He claimed that he had not seen that letter. I asked him if he might know where it was, if this was still his correct address. He verified, well, that is my address. It's probably sitting at my apartment or something. At this point.
Is that Exhibit 3 for the record?
Yes, my apologies. That is Exhibit 3, which you can see. So I was able to even help show him a copy of that letter, which he claimed he just hadn't seen or hadn't opened the letter or something else.
And then his second attempt at the NAPLEX, he also failed. Is that correct?
Yes, he took the NAPLEX again a few months after that first initial attempt and was unsuccessful in that attempt as well.
And that's also in Exhibit 3?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And what other, after you sort of went over this situation with this letter that he should have got, what other sort of explanations did Mr. Dixon have at that point?
Well, pretty quickly, we basically explained to him he had no legal right to be behind the counter in any way serving patients. He was not legally authorized to act as a pharmacist, as an intern, as an extern, or as a graduate intern, and basically told him that anything that he had touched to help fill it was being done illegally. At that point, we asked them to go ahead and just shut the front of the store. They had no pharmacist. They had no legal ability to function. They turned off their light, I think stuck a sign on the door. And Mr. Dixon quickly started pulling prescriptions he had been filling that day, as if, I guess he started trying to reverse them. And after a little bit, I finally said, you really don't even have authority to mess with anything in this computer, processing prescriptions, reversing prescriptions, or anything else. Someone else is going to have to take care of that.
And was the PIC notified at that point what had happened?
Yes, we were able to talk to the PIC owner on the phone. I was able to step back to a more secluded area of the pharmacy and I basically explained to her, I'm not trying to scare you, but I can tell you very quickly, this is one of the wildest or worst things I have probably seen in nearly 20 years with the board. That this is not legal at that point. And I know we will have a hearing for her later. I think she seemed very surprised. It appeared to me that she had been assured by Mr. Dixon that he was working legally and that all of this was okay and approvable through the Board of Pharmacy. I will tell you that personally, I got the distinct sense, you could ask Dr. Holland as well, that this wasn't just a happenstance accident. It almost seemed like there was an active process of potential deceit for the owner to make it seem like he could legally do these processes.
All right, and so Mr. Dixon has been in front of this board before, correct? With regard to his law exam?
Yes, Mr. Dixon, and we have a screenshot in Exhibit 4. He actually was unsuccessful in taking the law test the first time and the second time, which meant he had to come before the board at a previous date for a request to take the law exam the third time. That is important in a couple of aspects. Because of his unsuccessful multiple attempts at the law exam, we were actually able to go back and analyze that, yes, there were questions in test 1 and test 2, that even the test that he failed, that would reflect his understanding, at least he answered it correctly more than once, that he understood that an intern or graduate intern cannot work without supervision of a pharmacist.
All right, and let's go into the phone call. Did the Board of Pharmacy receive a complaint about smoke or that the medicine shop smelling like smoke earlier that week?
Yes. Unbeknownst to Dr. McCready, I had had some contact with the owner, guaranteeing that unless there was something that was identified as fire, temperature, or smoke damage, that even though there may be a odor of smoke, the pharmacy would be able to continue to operate. Someone, and I'm unfamiliar with who, had called in and made a complaint that there had been a fire with the pharmacy and it smelled like smoke, and a citizen apparently thought that it was not suitable to be open. At that point, Dr. McCready called the pharmacy, and we have a recording of that call where Mr. Dixon identified himself as a pharmacist.
All right, I'm going to attempt to play that
If it will not work there,
on.
let me see if I can play it here.
Okay.
Work on that. All right.
I'm trying.
Turn on click share.
The medicine shop in North Little Rock. If you are interested in one of our COVID-19 vaccines, they are available on Tuesdays and Fridays from the hours of 9 to 5 with no appointment necessary. If you are interested in one of our flu, pneumonia, shingles, or Tdap vaccines, they are available any day with no appointment necessary. If you are a doctor's office or would like to leave a message or know your prescription number, please press 2. If you would like to speak to a member of the pharmacy, please press 1. Thank you and have a great day. Thank you for calling the medicine shop. Please hold for the next available agent.
She is not. She's out today. Can I help you with something? Are you going to the pharmacy? Hey, Brenda, you want a pharmacy?
Are you guys right down from the North Bar? We are, yes. Yeah, well, we got a complaint, or actually the Department of Health, that the pharmacy smells like smoke and all that. I thought, well, I had a fire down there. Yeah. It happened. You guys didn't have any damage or anything like that? No damage, just smoke. Yeah, it's the smoke smell. Yeah, well, I told the Department of Health I would call in check, so. Okay, yeah, that's all it was. A little dusty in here, but we got cleaned up, but other than the smell, that's basically it right now. Yeah, okay, well, I appreciate it. No damage. Didn't get caught in there and damage any drugs or anything like that. No, we're at the complete end of the strip that South North Bar is on, so they weren't even close. Perfect, thank you. Well, you're welcome.
All right, and Dr. McCready, do you recognize those voices for the record?
Yes, I do.
I mean, Dr. Curley, do you recognize Dr. McCready's voice?
I do recognize Dr. McCready's voice, and also recognize Mr. Dixon's voice from having dealt with him the same week.
And there's no other person named Keith that I've registered as being employed at the medicine shop, correct?
There's not.
Anything else for the record that you want to add that we have not gone over?
I don't believe so.
Not for Dr. Curley.
Board, any questions for Dr. Curley?
We have not referred this to the prosecuting attorney yet. That is a discussion we've had internally that that is one of the things that staff believes would be appropriate in this case.
We would ask for the board sort of direct us to do that, if that's the board's wishes.
What is the authority of the board for somebody that is not licensed?
So you could argue potentially technically that there is still authority to punish someone who is practicing pharmacy without a permit, just like there would be potential authority to punish someone who is illegally operating a pharmacy that was unregistered. The other things that would appear to be in the board's authority in this instance would be to, bar any future applications or instruct the staff not to process any further attempts at taking Naplex for this individual.
We have any responsibility to public, to make public announcements? There certainly would seem to be ramifications for insurance as well.
Those are all issues that we believe fall on the ownership and the pharmacy itself. They are represented by counsel, and we are looking towards a future hearing with the board.
Are the pharmacist and pharmacist?
They are.
Have we had any enhanced monitoring of that pharmacy client?
It is our understanding at this time that everyone who is working there at any given time is actively licensed as required by the board. I do have the ability to tell you that the day that this happened, before Dr. Holland and I left, they were able to get another pharmacist who had worked there part-time previously in school and was a licensed pharmacist and continues to be a licensed pharmacist, who was able to come in. They, upon the instruction of ownership, were able to take away the keys and ability to enter the pharmacy for Mr. Dixon and escorted him out of the building without the ability to return.
Has any review been that were filled during this, let's say, inappropriate time?
Dr. Holland has done that. If you look at the record, we are talking about thousands of records. You can see how thick the actual book is if you try to print it, which required a massive amount of redaction to remove any patient identifiable information. But once again, many of those issues are future issues for the pharmacy and the pharmacist.
I guess I have sort of a procedural question, but with the magnitude of all of this, what distinguishes if you do like one of those emergency temporary something for the pharmacist in charge or for the pharmacy, given the magnitude of
in this instance, if this person had been a licensed intern at the time and continuing to try to work, we would have probably tried to do an emergency hearing almost immediately to suspend their license as what we would say is the primary bad actor. This is I'm in my 20th year with the board. I have never seen or heard of anything like this happening, not just in Arkansas, but even elsewhere, because there was no active license. It was made very clear with the ownership that day that, this can't happen. The ownership took immediate corrective action in order to ensure that ongoing violation had stopped. And just like we would in a situation like that would have advised.
So everything else at this location seems to be on the up and up. It was just this.
We're trying not to get into everything else with the location at this time because they have their rights to a hearing without here. So
I guess that was my ultimate question, was why there wasn't emergency action taken against the facility. Is that a valid question?
It's a valid question. We did not at that point
think so.
Need to do an emergency hearing to shut down the pharmacy when the immediate issue was fixed.
Okay.
We hope to get them in at this meeting, but we've had a request for continuance.
To what
Dr.
capacity?
Jolly. Go ahead.
Dr.
I'm
Kraus
just,
first.
I'll just raise my hand and go after you.
Okay.
In what capacity is Keith Dixon licensed or authorized? Does he carry any license with us right now whatsoever?
None at all.
So the only thing we can do is prevent him from applying.
I
Really, he's outside our jurisdiction.
Well, he's not outside of our jurisdiction because he had violations when he had an active license, if that makes sense. Like,
What are you gonna do? Take his license away?
well, I mean, you could, that's the problem. You could fine him
And then what? if
for
he doesn't pay?
violations.
I mean, he don't have to pay. He don't have to do anything.
Well, but what we do
Well, if
have, we
you-
can have teeth in.
We
We can
recommended prosecuting.
discipline him, make it a record, refer it to the district attorney, and we could issue a fine, but that probably would be worth no
Yeah, he
effort.
is unlicensed at this time, but if you look at like Exhibit 8, if I can open the right exhibit. If you look at Exhibit 8 and you have all of these instances where he was he was licensed as an intern, was acting as an extern or as a graduate intern all that time without a pharmacist present, those were violations of a licensed individual. You would have full authority, without argument, in my opinion, of fining and any other punishment of that license that has now expired because he had an active license at that time. You could fine him for every one of those transactions. Whether you get the money ever or not is a different issue. You could also basically ban him from being eligible to apply for NAPLEX testing again, or from obtaining a license in the state of Arkansas.
You can't bar him from taking an Applex. You can bar him from having a license in Arkansas.
You could bar our staff from being the approving authority for him to take NAPLEX. So if you're taking NAPLEX, a state board has to release you in
That's
order
a federal thing. So he could take it from somebody. It's say Mississippi or Tennessee or somebody said, right?
Possibly so.
And fining him and then him not paying it would also be part of the public record. So that would show in any future.
Yes.
And Dr. Kraus, to Dr. Kirtley's point, there were 24 days there from May of 22 to 11/30 of 22, where he would have been licensed during that period, where he was unsupervised.
But our punishment. I'm sorry.
Dr. Holland, thanks for your comments, but let's wait for.
Sure.
Any other questions of Dr. Kirtley?
Dr. Mike had a
I have
question.
some. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, it seems like because he was acting like a pharmacist in all those cases, we should still be able to find him in those. I get it. He wasn't even licensed for part of it. And it's not even the fine. It's the fact that you can't just come in and be a pharmacist if you're not a pharmacist. So I think seems like we should be able to do something, even if we also refer it. Because someone else may not understand the gravity of a pharmacist acting like a pharmacist, someone outside the board. So it just seems like we have to do something to show that that was not okay here.
Dr. Mack, I do not disagree with what you're saying. The part I was trying to clarify is he absolutely had a license and was, as a licensee, performing consistent violations at one period of time. No one generally questions that there's fine authority during that. Where it gets a little bit weird is trying to find someone without a permit or that, you know, no longer has a permit. You could issue whatever fine the board deems necessary based on whatever number of violations. If he does not like that, he has the opportunity to appeal that to court. If he does not pay that, it would still stand out that it is a outstanding fine with the Board of Pharmacy.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions of Dr. Kirtley?
And also I'll add, if we have a valid order from the board for him to pay a fine, I can go to circuit court and ask for contempt if he doesn't pay it. So that gives a little bit of enforcement power on that end if we wanted to do that.
Council, any redirect?
No.
Right.
I'm gonna waive closing and just rest at this point.
Fantastic. And I just realized, let the record reflect ex post facto that Dr. Kirtley was sworn in. All right, and council is not going to make a closing statement, so we will go straight to deliberations. At this time, we will go off the record for the board's recess for deliberations and a decision regarding the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and or any penalties to be handed down. Once the board reaches a decision, we will go back on the record.
Yeah, I'm good. Not really.
Is this a situation of willful ignorance, or is it mere negligence and not realizing what the requirements were
You mean of him or?
of him? I don't know what you.
The simple negligence, but rather gross negligence.
I mean, is this something that someone who had been to pharmacy school should know?
Well, yeah, because you're seeing it every day at this point in your career. I mean, you're hearing when is the NAVPLEX and when do you get when's graduation, and when's all this stuff going on. Yeah, I mean, it just, and we can, punish him to the fullest extent. I mean, we say, look, you need to buy all new cars, and it's not gonna matter. We need to send the prosecuting attorney's office and let that handle it.
It seems that way to me. I'm just asking because I don't know. Obviously, he's representing his pharmacist.
Press charges, prosecuting attorney's office, and then turn around and talk to the pharmacy and ask them why they didn't do due diligence on checking out who they hired.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask another question? I'm not allowed to ask a question, or do we have to go back on record?
We're off the record right now.
Maybe. Prior to, was he
Can you put on your microphone?
He's been there a while.
So how many violations do we have?
9,000 something. It's 9,000 something prescriptions.
It's 9,000 or so.
If I understood Dr. Holland, that he broke it down based on different roles that he was playing, but yet still of record, it was 9,768 prescriptions.
Well, he obviously knew it was fraudulent because he wasn't putting his own initials in he was the pharmacist on record by signature, but not in the computer.
So he was
I kind of wonder how much that there could be a system issue. Sometimes the pharmacist that signs in,
But he worked by himself on a bunch of those days.
If you notice, his prescription volume jumped up significantly after 12/1. Of course, the time frame's longer.
For what it's worth, the criminal statute for this provides for a fine for imprisonment. And also for a fine of not more than $100 for the first offense and $100 or 30 days imprisonment or fine and imprisonment for each succeeding offense. And each day the person shall fill prescriptions, compound or dispense medicines is a separate offense. So however many days would constitute an offense for the crime. From our standpoint, I guess it's the number of prescriptions that would count as violations of the act.
10 months.
So what do you want to do? I mean, you want to get our staff and say, look, prosecute this guy in court? Or do you, I mean, that's what I would think.
We should definitely refer it to
That's
the
fine.
prosecuting attorney.
Why don't we do both? Find
Yeah.
him so we have a record and send it over to court.
Agreed. Agreed.
Why he should be allowed to take the Naplex, then, yeah, but I don't think he should be allowed to do that before he comes and appears before the board.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, all this criminal activity.
Forever, yeah.
Yeah.
It's criminal activity, but at the same time, I mean, it's not like a Joe off the street walked in and started filling prescriptions here. I mean, this is not somebody that's totally unknowledgeable about drugs and about what's going on.
Well, I would argue that that's not the case. He failed the NABLEX at least twice. He failed the law exam twice.
All the NAPLEX says is you can pass the NAPLEX. It doesn't say you can work in my pharmacy.
But it's
You
the
said
standard
that
for
he was not
license.
unknowledgeable. That's evidence that he did not have sufficient knowledge that would suggest he was competent to practice.
Right, but I mean, he's gone through 4 years of pharmacy school. So it's not like he would just drug off the street and started filling prescriptions.
Well, why don't we just
I'm not
go
asking.
off the street and just pick somebody that if we're just gonna let
But if it
anybody.
was somebody off the street, we still wouldn't have anything to say over them because they're not licensed by us.
I think we've established that
So
we
you're
can,
suggesting that he has no subservient responsibility to us, but we have no oversight.
Do what you want to do and see what happens.
Okay, so let's bring it back around to this. The Board of Pharmacy regulates the practice of pharmacy in the state. This guy was practicing pharmacy. I think whether or not he was licensed is, in my opinion, a moot point, but I would obviously defer to Ms. Vales on that, but he was still practicing pharmacy. And he practiced pharmacy through a gateway that he entered pharmacy through his internship. So I think personally, we have oversight over this entire timeframe.
I do too.
The question is, what do we want to do? I've heard a fine. I've heard bar from taking the Naplex. Are there any other actions that we would want to consider?
I think we should
Report it.
recommend
District
the
attorney.
prosecutor.
Report it to the prosecutor.
Yeah, and from barring from getting any license from the State Board of Pharmacy,
Okay,
technician or otherwise.
okay. If somebody kind of, and we may want to go back on the record and ask a few more questions, and that's fine. But is somebody getting down? Let's see, I can.
So wait,
Fine.
somebody write this.
We don't know how much we can fine, right, yet, or do we know that?
Up to $500 per offense, I think.
Oh,
Fine, Naplex, no licensure from the board. And prosecuting. As far as the fine goes, I believe we can fine up to $1,000 per incident. The thing I've always kind of struggled with is what's the definition of an incident and how do you want to structure that? So,
I would suggest $100 per prescription.
okay. That'll be a, now.
$970,000.
$100,000.
I don't get it in.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No.
You're right.
It would show up on a credit check as a lien.
But he would have to go to, like, if we took that to court, we would pay it. You're gonna bankrupt the guy.
yeah.
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 But we don't have to fine him what we think he can pay. We just fine him what we want to fine. He can come back.
Rather than per prescription.
Total days worked. Okay, so this is broken down for us. So total days worked non-licensed was 104. That's a pretty clean number. If we just wanted to look at the number of days non-licensed. Of course, we've got evidence that even when he had a license, whether it was an extern or an intern or graduate intern or an intern prior to graduation, that he may have been signed in as a pharmacist or doing the final checks. And I trust the testimony that our inspector gave on that. But looking at the days worked, I guess the question would be, do we only want to maybe take into consideration the total days work that were non-licensed just as a clean way of looking at this, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds good.
So that would be 104. And so if we went with $100 per day, that'd be a $10,400 fine. We went with 250. That would be somewhere in the ballpark of 25,000.
I think I'd go 500, being that's the maximum the APA goes to and half of what we go to.
So
Now, why are you taking out the ones where he was licensed? Because he still wasn't licensed as a pharmacist. I'm just not following that. Sorry.
Well, he was licensed as an extern and as a graduate intern and as an intern.
Doesn't
That-
mean he can be a pharmacist. Right? If he were there without a pharmacist, he would still be breaking the law because he can't be a pharmacist.
I don't think I have that broken down. I may have to go back on the record to ask that. I've just got number of days worked, licensed and unlicensed. I don't have number of days worked licensed, but by himself.
But he wouldn't be licensed by himself.
Licensed unsupervised.
He was unsupervised, yeah, 61 days where he was unsupervised.
61 days.
Let's go back on the record and ask.
Okay, so maybe there's overlap where even as an unlicensed, he wasn't there by himself. So we would have considered him supervised. I don't know. We probably need to go back on the record, Mr. Baxter, and ask a few clarifying questions.
All right, we're back on the record for the board to ask additional questions of witnesses and counsel, please.
Okay, trying to break it down. We got 104 days. He worked non-licensed. But would some of that have included maybe when the PIC was there, providing theoretical supervision to an unlicensed employee?
Yes, sir. So if you actually look in Exhibit 2, excuse me, the numbers there on Exhibit 8, it actually should be 135 days worked non-licensed. The dates were a little wrong there on that Exhibit 8. Now that I see that, Exhibit 2 is correct based on that 12/1 date where he would have been completely unlicensed. The intern license would have expired on 11/30. So the table that is below that on Exhibit 2, page 2, I believe, we could break it down into days where there showed to be supervision and days that there showed to be no supervision during that time frame, if that's what you would like. And I can do that. I could probably get you those numbers.
On the unlicensed
You're
dates,
talking
that
about
doesn't matter, right?
During the days where he
He was
had either a
licensed.
graduate intern or he had an extern status or an intern.
I could break it down any way you preferred.
My question would be is how many days? So he worked 135 days when he was not licensed at all.
That's correct.
How many days did he work while he was licensed but worked alone? Do we know that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
So where he was licensed as an intern or extern, but he was the only, he was
only
there
one
alone.
there,
Yeah, he wasn't
unsupervised.
unsupervised.
So for that,
Thank you, Clint. That's where I was trying to get to too.
you said.
And do we know that from the record
Right.
if he was
Unsupervised
putting
while He
in?
was licensed.
Yeah.
24 is what I came up with.
And Brandon, is that because he could have been, it seems like he was putting initials in as a as somebody else, the pharmacist. But do we really know if he just put those initials in or if they were present?
So on the daily prescription logs that I was able to pull that showed all the dispensing records for each day that I requested, for the pharmacist on that far right column, and I believe that's should be exhibit 6. In that far right column, it would show him as the pharmacist of record. So I had to go through these line by line and determine who was the dispensing pharmacist on nearly 2,000 plus pages of records, and determine who was the pharmacist of record, which I could do a quick search, which would pull all of that for him. But what I had to then do is total the number of prescriptions that were that day. And if Dr. Barr was on any of those, I couldn't say that he was totally unsupervised at that point. I'm saying if there were no records whatsoever of any other pharmacist that day, I would assume he was the only pharmacist there at that point, because there's no other dispensing taking place in that dispensing record.
So that's a conservative number.
That's, in my opinion, that is a conservative number.
What is that total number?
159.
Not to mention, like, typically, which I don't know the computer system that they use, but you would have to have, like, if she's listed as the pharmacist, he would have to be fraudulently putting in some, like, you have to pass over like DUR and all that kind of stuff. Like, he's fraudulently at that point doing all of that, which I would think she would be aware of.
To me, some of it falls on the responsibility of the PIC.
Oh, big time.
Especially during the license. I don't really need to go into that right now. But anyway, I'm just trying to find a way where it's clean, where whatever we come up with as the number of incidences is pretty objectionable, and we're not trying to get too far in the weeds on how he was signed into the computer or whatever. So, okay, any additional questions? Go ahead.
No, it's for later.
And again, I think that table in exhibit 2 is by far that's your best reference for this, for the breakdown.
Any other questions for council?
I think the other thing is, if you look at the charges we charged on C6, it's charges C6 through charge C 8,776 to incorporate all those examples of prescriptions that we felt like were individually touched. That's not a C6, that's 8,000 something charges individually.
So I made a comment while we were off the record, and I just want to see legally if I'm mistaken. So we're regulating, part of the charge of the Board of Pharmacy is to regulate the practice of pharmacy in the state. And so if in this scenario, or if someone just opened up a pharmacy and started selling drugs, never even been to pharmacy school, does the board still have oversight for those situations?
I would say yes. If they had a pharmacy permit and there was no one there with a legitimate license, we would immediately bring in the pharmacy permit to also stop the pharmacy permit. This was different because they did have the ability to run it in a legal fashion other than this one person. Like we hear legend or rumors of people that are found to have had a fake pharmacist in there. This one is really odd because it had an intern license at one point, but it expired, but continued to work even after notification from the board and everything else, really as if they were a pharmacist or a graduate intern had it been 25 years ago, not a current set of facts. So if you had another pharmacy to open and a fake pharmacist unlicensed, then we would immediately shut down that pharmacy and see what action we could possibly take, not only with the board, but also looking at criminal action potentially with the prosecutor for the person impersonating pharmacists.
And I'd add, we have many different entities that come into the boardroom with allegations that aren't licensed. We had some reverse distributors appear that didn't have a license. We've had some wholesalers that shipped into the state of Arkansas during pharmacy practice business, and they were not licensed too. And so if that sort of gives you a little bit of leeway, you've done it before, essentially.
Thank you. We're ready to go back off.
All right, back off the record for the board to continue deliberations.
Look at those charges. They are kind of based off of the number of prescriptions that he took.
Yeah.
So should we base our,
Just the math on that makes it an enormous number really fast.
it does $10 prescriptions, 87,000.
What is that? It's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's his fault for filling prescriptions, not as a pharmacist.
I think we go with the board numbers that they have.
Is there a minimum that you can do per? I think it's both. I think it's both.
He impersonates the pharmacist.
I understand what you're saying, Dr. Kraus. And I don't necessarily disagree that in some of this is I think that anything that was happened after the period of licensure definitely falls on the Mr. Dixon. Before that, I think we could argue that was he just doing what he was allowed to do, you know, and some of that kind of stuff.
Other than practicing unsupervised.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, and I agree, but we've had other instances of non-pharmacists filling prescriptions. For instance, techs or people that are filling things without a pharmacist checking. Maybe a pharmacist being found, he was gone, or the pharmacist gets there late and the techs are already open filling prescriptions. Those are the same thing.
He was
No.
doing it as a matter of pattern, as a matter of daily
Just
business.
working as a
These are
pharmacist.
just instances where maybe something happened.
Okay.
And we haven't gotten into this, but I'm sure he was not doing this out of the goodness of his heart. I'm sure he was making money off of this. And so he benefited from his crime.
Is there a minimum? Like, I know we can do up to 1,000, but is there a minimum? Like you can
I think
do,
I'm aware.
so if you do $10 per charge, it's around the same amount as if you did 500 per day that he worked. Cause the total, the 159, the 135 non-licensed and then 24 licensed unsupervised gets you to 159. And at 500, that gets you to 79,500.
I wasn't too much thought to it.
159 days and we can find $1,000 per day, then I would find $1,000 per day.
I think my only thing is that is our charges are based off number of prescriptions filled. So do we need to match a fine up to that? Or is that, that's a question more than anything.
Good point.
What is it?
He said that since the charges are based off of number of prescriptions, that should we
Yeah.
base the fine off the number of prescriptions?
And particularly since he didn't appear to contest that.
Then we could say
$20 per
proven and the
charge,
charges were true.
175. That's about the same as $1,000 per. So it would get you to
I
the
mean, you can
same
do a flat
thing.
fee fine too.
Yeah,
Nobody says it has to be exactly $1,000 or 20 or whatever.
right.
It's
It's
a
just
$100,000
whatever you come
fine.
up with a dollar amount, you just divide it by, and it doesn't really matter. Okay. So what do you guys want the fine to be? Do you want it to be something that's realistically potentially could get paid at some point down the line, or do you just want to make it some, what do you want to do?
I think whatever it should be. I don't think we worry about realistic. He probably gonna pay any of it and it does, we don't care. It's not whether he pays it, it's we need to make a statement. You can't be a pharmacist without being a pharmacist.
Well, and if it gets the lien thing, then it would prevent him from doing some fraudulent activity in another healthcare field or any field, I guess.
Well, I respectfully disagree. I think fines should be structured in a way that are realistic to getting paid, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to make a motion or make a vote. So I'll just.
I don't know what
Yes.
defines realistic payment.
Well, I would say $175,000 for. Like I said, that's my comment. So however you guys want to structure it, if we could maybe start working toward getting the motion together. Like first question is what do we want the fine to be?
What kind of figures are y'all looking at?
Well, I say that we word it based on acknowledging the number of prescriptions that he dispensed illegally. But then also, as Clint suggested, that we can just pick a round number. $150,000.
Yeah.
I think you might want to look at it from a standpoint of how much a pharmacist is paid for working for a year. It would seem to me that if you're going to discourage people from pulling a stunt like this, it at least ought to penalize somebody as much as they might stand to make by having a scheme like this.
Which might be around 120.
Yeah, 120, 140.
Yeah.
I still like the 150, but.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just the number.
Did you say 250? Is that what you're saying?
150.
Okay.
Okay, so for whoever's going to be making the motion, 150,000. Just as a reminder to make sure we're all on the same page, the number of prescriptions is 8,776. That's what is noted in the charges. And then the Naplex, the inability to. What did you guys say about prevent the individual from being licensed?
Ineligible to apply for pharmacy, pharmacist.
Any licensure from the Board of
Any
Pharmacy.
license issued by the Board of Pharmacy.
Okay, so.
And Brian, technically it's 8,770 prescriptions, and then the others were the first 6 were other charges. I don't know if that matters.
And then you're going to ask the board counsel to turn this over to the prosecuting attorney.
I would say forward a record to the of this matter to the prosecuting attorney, so they'll have the stuff that we have.
Okay, so are we ready to go back on the record? And is someone ready to make a motion?
I'll make it.
We're ready to go back on.
All right, we're back on the record for the board's findings of facts and conclusions of law.
All right, I believe we have a motion in this matter. Go ahead, Dr. Richmond.
All right, in the matter of William Keith Dixon, case number 2023-171, allegations A1 through A21 being true and charges C1 through C 8,776 being proven, that we have the following findings. That one, that Mr. Dixon not be allowed to or be banned from taking the Naplex at any point in the time in the future, banned by our staff. 2, that Mr. Dixon not be allowed to get any licenses or permit from the Arkansas State Board of Pharmacy of any kind, whether it's intern, technician, pharmacist. That he be fined $150,000 for the 8,770 prescriptions that he filled illegally. by himself and that this case be referred to prosecuting attorney for any potential criminal consideration.
Okay.
Just a question, did you say we've made the findings and the charges? Okay, I just missed that part. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Let the
Thank you,
record
sir.
reflect that the decision was unanimous. Please reduce the board decision to writing and make attempt to service upon all parties. If the respondent cares to appeal the decision, he can appeal under any specific provisions relating to this board or under the Arkansas Administrative Procedures Act, Arkansas Code annotated 2515-201 at Secretary. Assuming there are no other questions, this hearing is concluded.
I have a question. Assuming the time for appeal passes, I would assume that you would file a motion to or an action to convert the fine into a judgment in court.
We could explore that.
I'm sorry.
We can explore that. I know we've looked at some issues like that before for some fines many years ago, and there seemed to be limited ability to do that, but it's absolutely something we can look at.
Yeah, I think you're going to have trouble. Normally you would get it because some
Yeah.
not having jurisdiction over this guy. I think you're going to have a judgment to be able to enforce it.
Or see what happens in a criminal.
We'll report back to the board.
Yeah, we'll just have to. He's saying go to court to get a judgment against them, where it's not just the Board of Pharmacy saying you owe this, but have a court judgment that also reaffirms that that money is owed back to the agency.
And would appear on the record as far as other creditors, things like that go.
Yeah. That way, if there ever was any sort of a payment out or a settlement from a bankruptcy, you would be listed as a creditor. We've had some other states that have explored some issues like that, but we're actually off the record.
Okay, we were back on the record. That was my understanding. Are there any other questions or comments on the record? All right, this hearing is terminated. Thank you.
That's all I have for you guys. I got to send some more stuff to medical board. I'm going to be there bright and early tomorrow morning.
Okay.
On PEP and PrEP.
Before we go, I've got a possible solution to the guidance on where you can waive things and so forth.
Okay.
I'll just suggest this.
Yeah.
I would suggest that the board give the agency staff discretion to waive application defects in three specific areas. And I want to make it clear that's just the discretion to waive. If you still see something screwy, you can still bring it to the board. But for DWI, all of these would be disclosed. If the matter has been disclosed in the application and is a DWI that occurred more than 10 years ago.
We waive any first DWI automatically.
Okay.
So if it's a single DWI, even if it was a month ago, it's a warning letter.
Scratch DWIs then.
If it's two DWIs, they come talk to you.
That's fine. I'm good with that.
Okay.
On theft, I was thinking that's disclosed, occurred more than 5 years ago, and involves less than $500. That, by the way, is half of the store. And then for assault, occurred more than 5 years ago.
Then I would imagine that is as long as it is not a felony.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yes. For misdemeanor.
Right. Exactly.
And you have to win the fight.
So is that a motion, Harold? For those two things?
You want to make it
It would help us.
I'll second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Motion to adjourn,
At 3:26.
second.
Yes.
Any opposed?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
See you, Debbie.